I'm Celine Williams, and welcome to the Leading Through Crisis podcast, a conversation series exploring resiliency and leadership in challenging times. My guest today is Tutti Taygerly, who is an executive leadership coach and professional speaker, supporting CEOs and tech leaders to embrace their unique leadership style to achieve professional impact. She's previously spent 22 years as a design leader at design firms, startups, and large companies, including Disney and Facebook. Welcome to the show, Tutti.
Thanks so much for having me, Celine. I'm excited.
I am also excited for multiple reasons, which I hope we get into because I'm a big fan of design thinking. So I love that you have this design background.
Yay.
But before we even get into that, I want to start with where I always start, which is when you hear the name of this podcast, which is Leading Through Crisis, what comes up for you, or what does that mean to you?
Yeah. And I love words and semantics and the origins of it. Like there's some parts of my college major where there was linguistics. And one of the things about crisis to me is that, hey, it's something that's kind of intense. There's some change, there's some difficulty, there's some stuff that's unexpected. And so this is a little freaky, but what I really love about it is through all the years where I was a design leader and there was a sense of design thinking and problem solving, crises are almost design constraints. There's something that happened from the outside and you're like, oh shit, didn't expect that. Where did that come from? All right, now what do you do about it? There's another ingredient that you put into the mix. How do you lead through this? How do you deal with this? And the way that I say it, it probably sounds so nonchalant and easy, but I mean, it's not. Like I left corporate because of 3 big crises in my own personal life. And they like are slamming you against the wall, churning you up, knocking you upside down because it's change, and change is hard and brutal. And the essence of leading through crisis is kind of keep going, knowing that there is an inner wisdom that will see you out through the end, that it'll be fine. It's one step at a time. And it's, seeing them as different design constraints, life constraints, world constraints hitting you, and then continuing to go through the process. One of the things I always told my design teams and teams I worked with is it's trust the process. Keep on going and the ideas will come, it will unfold. I think that's a lot of my philosophy of leading through crisis.
I love all of that. And I really want to emphasize the importance of trust inside of what you said. And I know you said trust the process at the end, but I think it is one of the hardest things we have to do when we're in a crisis of any sort is trust, whether it's ourselves, whether it's that everything's going to work out, whether it's the people around us. It is when we are in crisis mode and our brain is telling us that the sky is falling, we struggle to trust. And I'm really curious how you maintain that trust when it feels like the sky is falling. What works for you to remind yourself that it's about trusting the process, to use your language?
I mean, it's not easy. It is not easy at all. So I use 2 tools really to remind myself of this. And one is the fact that I've known this and done this for years and years. Yeah, I used to work for the world's top brands, and they would come to us to be like, what is the future of connected televisions? What's the future of autonomous vehicles? And like starting it was always like, oh my gosh, it's the discovery, it's the kickoff. How are we going to come up with this brilliant idea to help define this company's future? And if you've seen pictures of design thinking, like the start is a mess. It's always a big, hairy ball of messiness. So one of the things that really helps remember this is the grooves of repetition, to know that this is something that I've repeated with clients and teams over and over and over again, to be like, there is a design process of design thinking and divergence and convergence, and you will get to something good. So what I tell a lot of my clients is, how do you use your history? How do you use your grooves and the times in your history where you've overcome and done this to realize that, hey, it will actually work out well. It might not feel like it right now, but there is the ability to take a step back and make some space to get out of this, as you were talking about, intense, 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 must respond, must act. That just like flight or flight or freeze mode where you're just so jacked up. And so a lot of it, um, I talk about just being able to take space, to know that there's periods of time where you gotta brainstorm and ideate and come up with tons of ideas. And there's other times where you've gotta chill. You've gotta let it sit, gotta go out, take that walk. I mean, I surf, get out into the water in nature, or take a shower. And that's where some of the brightest ideas will come, when you're not forcing and fighting and grinding so hard, which, from my experience, has been a lot of what at least the world of tech that I know is about. Just work harder, grind harder, do more. It's, being able to balance and know that there is another side to it.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's definitely, listen, I think that kind of hustle idea is more
Mm.
common everywhere than I would like to see it be, but it's definitely the default in it has been the default in tech.
Mhm.
Hopefully it will not be the future default in tech, but it definitely has been the default in tech. Whoever works the hardest, works the most, keeps pushing and driving is the person who's going to quote win. And
Mhm.
often the only thing they're winning is burnout and exhaustion and not
Exactly.
having the best idea because they're overspending their time trying to solve a problem.
Yep. I mean, I think if you wanna be okay, if you wanna be, maybe parallel to the competitors, parallel to your peers, the execs around you, you can hustle and grind and do it. And it might work for months or maybe some years maybe, but it is really hard to have true innovation, breakthrough, whatever that new idea or next direction is, without making that space and making that room to trust. And I
Mhm,
think so, I mean, I did that for so many years. And I'm not going to say that there was anything wrong with it, because it does. That's what the culture rewards you for,
mhm.
right? We get those gold stars and those brownie points and like the little bings and the little like bonuses. And that's great. But I think both for like true breakthrough success externally, and then also I'd say more inner fulfillment, satisfaction, contentment, needs that longer view, that more trusting view, that space to be able to step out of the grind culture. It's a balance. There's periods where you're gonna have to do that,
Absolutely.
but all too often we get stuck like mindless zombies into, I don't know what I'm gonna do. All right, run down that to-do list. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Okay, move to my next calendar, my next appointment, my next goal. What's my OKR? All right, let's hit all that. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with that until sometimes it doesn't work anymore because it leads to burnout and overwhelm. And that's typically where people are looking to change. And that's a crisis too.
Yeah.
That's the time where it opens up people to make a change.
It's interesting because what you just said reminds me of there's two things that came up for me right away. And the first one is that it's oftentimes people, when they're in that cycle, they're just jumping from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis.
Mhm.
Like that becomes, so that loop is, and I appreciate that it's rewarded in many cultures. And you're right, it's not that it's not wrong. It's just that for most people at a certain point they hit a wall with how much they can keep in that loop. And that is, the more we can prevent that, that would be ideal. So to me, the first thing I heard was like, it's like jumping from crisis to crisis. And as we know, from as pretty much everyone has experienced in the past couple of years, that gets tiring, even if you're not the person who's having to solve a problem. And the other thing that I found really interesting in what you just said is it reminded me of, and I'm going to ask how, for your perspective on this, but it reminded me of what you were saying about design thinking, which is that it's that divergence and convergence. So it's like all of, a lot is happening, and then we don't want a lot to
Yeah.
happen. So
Yeah.
it's finding the balance. And it's really interesting
Mhm.
because what I hear is like there's such a parallel to even what you said about design thinking and finding a balance. And when you're in that loop, that's what you're not doing.
Mhm. Absolutely. I love this analogy because now I'm an executive leadership coach, and I coach people like a designer. Because what's really great is knowing that it's in flow and it's in shift from the divergence to the convergence. And Oftentimes when we're in a crisis, we're so stuck, we can't see the way out. We're just like, okay, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. I'm paralyzed. I don't know what to do. Or you just kind of get into this zombie busyness mode. What's wonderful, I think, of using design thinking to help solve and help people lead their way out of crises is it's really about perspective. How do you brainstorm and create and find, I don't know, 50 different solutions to this, of which all 50 are likely to be stupid, dumb, bad ideas. But that's not the point. The point is that you start to find different perspectives, and that can lead you to many, many different things. And then you converge on a choice and on a focus.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of what I do with my clients. It's so hard, or it's so hard to see the way out yourself because you are stuck in your own loops and self-sabotaging behaviors and the intensity of your emotions that it can take someone else to help hold the space to be like, all right, let's brainstorm. Let's take the time to see things from someone else's perspective. Let's be curious. Let's be crazy. Let's be stupid. Let's be funny. Giving yourself permission to do that, and that's the wild, open divergence. And then, yeah, there'll be a time when we focus and converge. And the other analogy I love you making is like there is the time of busyness and swirl and like craziness, and then there's got to be some of the quiet time, and that could be like in a 10-minute space
Mhm.
or it can be in a 10-month space and it just keeps in continual motion.
Yeah. So, for those who are unfamiliar with design thinking and what, we've said it a few times, and I mean, I'll fully own that I started it and I was like, I love design thinking. I think it's just such a beautiful way of approaching things. Um, but for those who are unfamiliar, how, what would be like a quick 2 minute, here's what design thinking is in a nutshell from an actual designer, not someone who just likes the concept of it, i.e. me. So how would you put it
Yeah.
as someone who has used this in a real, in a design environment and has this in a very
Hmm.
practical way as part of your background?
Hmm. So designers are problem solvers. There is a particular brief, a thing you want to solve, and it might be, you know, what is an app that allows you to book your booster COVID shot in a way that's universal? Like this is called out a problem. Or it might be, wow, I feel so stuck and frustrated with my job. Do I want to stay doing this? Do I want to aim towards that next promotion? Do I want to join the great resignation and jump to another job, or do I just want to quit and become start a startup or run my own business? So let's just say you start with a thing, a problem statement. And design thinking is a perspective on solving that problem that follows a particular design process. Oftentimes, it starts with research, which is understanding, asking the questions, being curious, understanding the motivations, and spending a lot of time asking the 5 whys. Because if you ask someone the question why, it's probably going to be, pretty surface level. Why are you unhappy with your job? What do you want to be different with your job? Be like, well, I don't like my boss. My boss just doesn't see the brilliance that I have. And then, well, but why? Well, she doesn't have trust in me. Okay, but why? Well, she doesn't know me. She's been my fifth boss in 5 years, and we haven't had the time to develop the relationship. And I don't have trust in I don't know if I have trust in this company anymore. I'm just giving you these
Yeah, yeah.
examples, but the more you ask why, the deeper you go, and that's a little bit of a process of research, whether that's into yourself or whether that's into okay, who are these people looking for booster shots? What is the driving motivation? What's the driving motivation behind say the company making the app or the people like who might use it. So it starts with research. And then from there, it's this process we've talked about of divergence and convergence, which is like, all right, when you start to understand the problems that people are having, what are some solutions that you might come to solve them? So brainstorming widely to be like, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Um, and then what I love about it the most is then narrowing to be like, all right, we just came up with 50 different ideas about what this person might want to do about their job next.
Mhm.
We don't actually know what's right because, sometimes we're stuck because we don't know what to do. And one of the things you just do is you pick a direction, or you pick a couple of directions and you narrow. And in design thinking and digital product design, you might do some prototypes, you might do some sketches, you might like build a little thing and just use it and see what happens. In coaching, it's often running experiments. So taking a little action, be like, all right, go talk to a couple of places, see what that is. Go have this conversation with your boss. Maybe you can build trust with your boss by playing with some vulnerability, playing with asking for what you want. And I realize I'm jumping between different metaphors, but it's using this process of curiosity and problem solving and widening the perspective and narrowing into choices to solve problems, whether it's a product problem in coming up with a particular product in Silicon Valley, or whether it's working with people in their lives.
Mhm.
Was that clear enough? I went a lot of different places.
No, I mean, I think it was, and I think it's I appreciate the insight, and the examples you gave, because they're going to resonate for different listeners in different ways, and I think that it is, one of the, so I'll tell you what, one of the reasons that I love it, and I use it in my work all the time, without people knowing I use it because I'm sneaky like that. Um,
Sneaky skin?
right? I think in this case, I think it's good. I'm not saying it's always good. But I use it all the time because I think it is inherently designed, because designed thinking is designed to break down assumptions and, gather data and information that is not just what we assume. And I think
Mhm,
we have created many systems that are inherently based on assumptions, not on
mhm.
data. And one of the reasons
Absolutely.
that I love design thinking is that I feel like I'm a broken record all the time, where I'm like, we need to stop making assumptions. Get to what is the fact here? What is the actual data or information? In many cases, it's mostly someone assuming, even in terms of physical products, what someone else wants, or what the problem is,
Yeah.
or what the thing is. And to me, that's always been, I know it's not necessarily the point of design thinking, but it is one of the greatest advantages of using design thinking in anything, is it it almost forces you, in the great way of being forced, to break down those assumptions.
Mhm, and to test them.
And
Like, sure,
yes,
you can have them as an assumption, but have that as a hypothesis and now go out and do something to see if that's true or
exactly.
not.
That's right. That continuous iteration, right? Like, take an idea and let's test it. And if it's wrong, let's move on to something else. And if we get data that confirms it, great. Then we start from there. But I agree.
Mhm,
I love that the scientific method idea of like, let's test all these hypotheses.
mhm.
Man, I wish people thought about that outside of high school science, because I feel like no, most people stop at that point.
I mean, the design process and the scientific method, it's the same.
Yep.
And I think there's something powerful in even naming the assumptions. My boss doesn't trust me because she didn't promote me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's an assumption, which so many people are afraid to say that out because it's kind of like, shit, I failed. That the next assumption is it's because I'm terrible at my job. And then you just start similar to the 5 whys, going deeper and digging deeper and then being like, "All right, let's see if this is true." A lot of the questions I ask my clients is this fact or fiction? And it's never one or the other. It's something in between.
Well, I think I love, so I'm going to go down a rabbit hole with you on this for a second, because I think I'm going to just call it right now. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about this, where and this was a friend, this was not like a coaching conversation. And I had asked the
Mhm.
question of, is what you're saying an assumption? Like, is this, or is there fact here? No, 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 it's fact. Great. So tell me what the fact is. And what the answer was fact plus assumption. Right? So it was fact and
Yeah.
feelings, not just the fact. So
Mhm.
it was, this person, um I can't remember exactly. It's like, this person responded to something I said in this way because blah blah blah. So it was,
Yeah.
the fact was, yes, the person obviously responded to you. That is a fact.
Yep.
The person said, I don't like that idea, or whatever it is. Because is all fiction. That is all your story
Yep.
and the assumption. And
Absolutely.
the really interesting thing to me inside of this, and this is why I was like, I'm going to take you on a rabbit hole, is I think there's absolutely power in naming assumptions. And I think my experience has been, many people don't even recognize an assumption when they're making it because in their mind, the story is the fact.
Bingo. I think you're completely right. It's almost, if we circle back to an earlier theme, it's this zombie mode. You don't recognize you're stuck in this cult of busyness and achievement, and you don't realize that you have these mind loops and assumptions until someone forces you to kind of say it out loud, like you did with your friend. And sometimes, like, I think the best parts are sometimes when someone says that out loud, they just start laughing. Because once it's named and in the space, they're like, yeah, I guess no, maybe my boss isn't about to fire me tomorrow
Yeah.
because of the way I messed up that presentation. Yeah, that's there's something just lovely about taking it to the extremes to
Yeah.
make it ludicrous and name them out loud, and that kind of loses a little bit of the power and brings the assumption side into the light.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think the other thing that happens in those cases is if you say something like that out loud, I think there's a few things. But if you say my boss is going to fire me because of the mistake I made, and then you don't think it's absurd when you say it out loud, and you think, oh shit, this might actually be real, it then gives you the power to go ask a question about it. It gives you the
Mhm,
power to go find out if that's true and if there's something that can be done about it, instead of waiting for something that instead of just being the recipient of whatever could happen, right? So it actually
mhm.
allows you to do something about it as opposed to just running that loop of a story.
Yeah. So looping back even to a theme you were talking about earlier, we were talking about trust the process and trusting yourself. Um, One of the stories that I tell a lot and I write about in my book that kind of pulls this design thinking and leadership threads into learnings and frameworks is I remember the first time I was fired. And, I was working so hard. I had two kids under 5. I live in San Francisco and I physically had an apartment in Seattle. I mean, just this is not this is not sustainable. This is woman, super mom. I had 2 jobs. And I remember the instant it happened, like we just gotten back from the first vacation I'd taken in 2 years, like 4 days in Mexico, and my kids had a stomach bug, so they were throwing up.
Oh
And
no.
in a video conference, I was told that not only was I being fired, I had to shut down an entire office and like let go of, a number of people in an office that I had built up. And it was horrific. And I hadn't had the wisdom to think about it beforehand. But I remember just that first feeling was like relief. Thank goodness. Cause I had known it was not working. I had known that I was not liking this, but I just had that such armor and that automatic zombie mode of do it, do it, do it, make it work, grind, just put in more hours and it'll work. And I think the reason why we were talking about firings and thinking of the worst case. I just remember that feeling of just such relief. And that's kind of going back to helping people listen to the trust. And
Mhm.
of course it was fine, right? Of course it was fine. It was the perfect thing to happen. Um, but I think what's really awesome is before that happening, helping people envision it, think about it, and being like, well, is that the worst thing? Is that something that maybe would be a blessing, would be a great way out of this situation? And how do you, as you mentioned, Celine, how do you take control over it? How do you take some actions? How do you make some changes?
Yeah. Um, I think that in and of itself is a very scary prospect for people to step into taking control and responsibility when I think if you're on that hamster wheel and if you're in that loop all the time, um, sometimes it's easier to not take the responsibility or the control of a situation, of what you're thinking, of what the reality is, because it's just another thing that puts you, it can feel in the moment, I'm not saying it is, but it can feel in that moment like it's just going to be another thing that keeps me on this hamster wheel. It keeps me in this loop and cycle. um and
Completely.
and I think, and this is just my opinion, I think the reality is that when we do that, that's actually the thing that gets us off the hamster wheel and out of that loop, but it never feels that way when we're in it.
Yeah. And I also think that's what a crisis helps you do.
Yeah.
It helps shake you out of that pattern. It's like whatever, a wrecking ball that knocks the hamster wheel over. And it is so hard, but sometimes it can be even harder to see that for ourselves, be trapped into careers for 20, 30 years. I've worked with like 3 time CEOs who have had 2 successful exits and they're on their third company and they're like, is this all there is? I'm like, well, what's the pattern? What's the hamster wheel? Right. And what's
Yeah.
the desire? What's the dream? What is it in terms of the life and career you want to create now that's going to make it different? And I think to your point, it's like you can get so stuck in that overwhelm and busy. And I know I was there for so many years that until you start to make the space and the breathing room, just like little bitty bits of spaces to trust yourself and find a little bit of this inner wisdom, it's so hard because it feels like another thing. You don't have room. You're juggling 20 plates already.
Well, and we societally, not maybe you and I, Tootie, necessarily, but we as a society tend to reward achievement and reward what things look like. And when
Of
we're
course.
right, when that's what we're looking for the reward and we know that's going to be the reward, then we are a 3 time CEO who has maybe never taken the step back to say, what is it that I want out of this? What
Mhm.
is my ultimate goal? Is it to just build businesses and sell, which is fine. By the way, if that is your goal, if that is what you want, great. Like
Yeah.
there's no right or wrong in any of this. But if they've never taken the moment, to think about what that is, if you hadn't taken the time to step back and say, what do I want my life, business, work, family, whatever to look like? Then how do we ever get off that hamster wheel?
Yep. Yeah. Because, and I'm going to say, like, I know I'm guilty of it. I love those shiny gold stars. They feel great to get them, right? That's what we're conditioned to do as kids. That is the education system
Yep.
that we're brought up in. That's the competitive education system and like the workplace system. Come on, performance reviews. This is what it is. Of course, and I'm not diminishing it because it's tied to financial reward. It's tied to status. It's tied to external validation. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not, I think it's the time and the space to think, does that match what I really want?
Mm-hmm.
And did it change? Maybe I wanted that through my 20s to be like a raging workaholic and to like build that name and career, but maybe something changed. Maybe something changed in terms of a different life priority or a career switch or something else entirely or a pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And I think we don't talk about that enough. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, is this idea that we ideally we are revisiting what that looks like for ourselves on a regular basis and not judging what we're doing in our 40s by what we wanted in our 20s and continuing to do the
Mhm,
thing in our 40s because we've never spent the time to think about it since we just jumped on a
mhm.
hamster wheel. And I think
Yeah.
inside of what you said there is it's really important because it is about, I think, the what is missing from a lot of what I see out in the world, and I'm guessing what you see, is that intentionality of asking the question and saying, what is this for me?
Mhm. Absolutely. I love the word intentionality, because I think I forgot about it when you were asking me to define design process. Because so much and design thinking, so much of it is knowing what you want the outcome to be. This problem, this thing you're trying to solve. It's like, what's it gonna feel like once you actually get it? What's the experience gonna be? What's your life gonna be like the day after you get that promotion?
Mhm.
Or, what's it gonna feel like for people to use this app and be able to find that place that they can actually make an appointment for their booster shot? I think the secret to like that design thinking is to really be able to feel and emote and understand how it is you want people or yourself to feel when you get to that stage. And that's the intentionality behind it. Because so often overachievers, hyperachievers, like you get that goal. Yay, I got that promotion. Yay, I launched my book. And what do you do the next day? What's the next goal? What's the
Mhm.
next goal? You just keep moving those damn goalposts when you're on that hamster wheel.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. And I think the other thing that happens is we can and I'm going to say this as someone who fully acknowledges that I hate a lot of the systems that are set up around goals for this reason. And I'm going to call it right now. This is my bias. I am owning my bias inside of this. But the reason I hate it is because it isn't really about setting an intention and then trusting that you'll get there, whatever it looks like, or that the intention is a feeling rather than this very specific way that everything has to be, which then always forces us to, we always end up moving that goalpost out and out, um,
Mhm.
because we're not. I think we're so focused on goals in that way that it's really hard for people to even understand what setting an intention is, and also how to release the attachment to that being a specific thing. And
Mhm.
I think that inside of what you just said, what I heard was like, that intention matters, but the attachment of the how or the specifics of it, which is so hard for us, which I think is why we end up moving, one of the reasons we end up moving the goalposts once we hit something, that is such a nebulous thing for people to grasp and
Mhm.
to understand how to use for themselves.
Yeah. No, so if I be a little controversial, I love goal setting.
I
Love it.
listen, do not agree with me.
And
Just I love when people disagree with me. It's my greatest joy.
well, here's what I love about it. And there's plenty of ways like in the system where it's completely over abused. I get it. I worked at Facebook for many years and there's a sense of like metrics, 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 and it's an advertising based company. But what I love about corporate goals from a tech perspective is the notion of setting 50-50 goals, which is, hey, you're going to set a bunch of goals, but the goal of the goal is to try and hit 50% of them. What that means is that some of them have got to be so wild and out there that if you actually achieved 100% of your goals, you're kind of doing it wrong because you were playing it too safe, or you're like, okay, I know that thing's achievable. So I love the notion from tech, and a lot of startups and companies do that, is to set 50-50 goals, because that means they need to be big enough and hairy enough and just like ridiculous enough to kind of add that part of it. And then the other thing that I love about it is, and of course, this is much harder to do if you're a corporation and you have OKRs and you're beholden to meeting these revenue goals. But what I love about some of the more out there goals, especially for personal development, for what people really want in their lives and careers, is having the ability to change your mind. And I think that's where it goes back to the intentionality. And to what you're talking about is just this attachment. I love goals. It's like a North Star. This is where you should go. But it's the checking in. It's like, is that still the right intention? Is that still what I want? It was a 50-50. So maybe it's not that. And then you get some of them, but I think we're talking about the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
concept of you're going somewhere, but don't be so 100% rigidly, forcefully attached to it.
I have not heard of 50-50 goals, and I that lines up way more with what I think goals should be truly. So I appreciate you bringing it up, because I think that having a direction matters. It does. Having a purpose, having you're heading in this direction, whether you get there on car, on bike, on foot, whether there's someone in the car with you, all of that stuff, you'll figure that out. But if you know you're
Mhm.
going to this destination, then you can get started, whatever that looks like. So I do fully appreciate that. And I think when definitely and this is why I'm saying I appreciate the 50-50. I definitely have not thought of it that way. Um, because we kind of grow up, you set a goal, you achieve the goal. If you don't, and if you don't achieve the
You
goal,
fail. If you didn't get it, you're a
that's
failure.
right. So which then people start shaming themselves, or they feel guilty, or
Mhm.
whatever their process is inside of it. And I love the 50-50 because it really leans into, you're not going to, there's going to, some things are going to work. Some things are not going to work. All of that is okay, because there's always going to be unknowns. There's always going to be change. There's always going to be crisis. We are not living in
Uh-huh.
a static world where I joke all the time. I say this to my clients all the time. I'm the master of strong opinions loosely held. I will
Yeah.
advocate, and I mean, you just saw it happen with goals. I mean, I will be like, this is my opinion. Then someone gives me better information. I'm like, actually, That's great. That is way more. I don't ever want to be so attached to something being so rigid that I'm inflexible. And I think that's what goals reinforce in the traditional way of thinking about it. And that's what I don't like. So I appreciate your perspective because you flipped my opinion truly on where I think goals, I think that 50-50 goals, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I love it when I hear it. And I think that's a lot of the magic of, well, I know we've talked a lot about these systems and these companies and these corporations and this like Silicon Valley cult of busyness. But the reason why I love being in this space is the dreams. The dreams and like the possibility are so big. And yes, it can come with a lot of bad shit and toxic masculinity and like command and control leadership, but there's still that possibility. And that's what I love about the 50-50 goals.
Yeah, I think that's, I I very much appreciate you sharing that concept because I truly had never heard of it. And I think it's really powerful. And I'm going to look up more about it because I love that. Um,
Awesome. I'm so glad.
yeah, thank you. We've talked about a lot of stuff, which is generally how these go because I enjoy having conversations. So I appreciate you being willing to play with me inside of this. And before we wrap up, I always like to ask my guests, is there anything that we didn't get to that you want to make sure we talk about before we wrap this up? Or is there something that we spoke about that perhaps you're like, I really want to just circle back and emphasize this or leave your listeners with this thought? Anything inside of that?
I think for me, one of the most profound paths towards entrepreneurship and writing and thinking has been really this concept of making space. And I want to leave your listeners with one of my favorite quotes. It's by Mike Vance, who was the dean of creative thinking at Disney for a lot of their great innovations. And his quote is, slowing down is sometimes the best way to speed up. And I love that because, it's a little bit of an aphorism. It's not immediately obvious, but it hits a lot of the themes of what we've talked about, that you can't recognize where you are. You can't trust yourself, trust the process if you're continually on this hamster wheel of achievement and gold stars and busyness. It's that slowing down gives you that perspective to be able to break patterns, to be able to be curious, to be able to set intentionality. And so many of us, I still do this. So many of us just think you just speed up and grind, grind, grind. So I just wanted to leave with that quote. Slowing down is sometimes the best way to speed up.
Thank you for that. I think it's a beautiful quote. And I think it's a great reminder for people right now as well, is that taking that step back and slowing down doesn't mean that you're not going to make progress or you're not going to move forward. You're not going to build momentum. It can actually sometimes be the thing that builds that momentum and moves you forward and makes the progress. So I very much appreciate that. Um, so for all of our listeners, this will be in the show notes, but they can find you online at tuttitaygerly.com. And
That's
I
right.
believe you mentioned you have a book as well.
Yeah, a lot of this thinking and writing and work that I do with my clients, I pulled together into a book that has the design thinking framework, has exercises, has inquiries to really thought provoking inquiries. And the book's called Make Space to Lead, and you can find it at makespacetolead.com.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Tutti, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. It was really lovely getting to know you, and I'm sure my listeners are gonna love this. It was a really powerful conversation, so thank you.
Thank you. It was so much fun. Didn't know it was going to go this direction, but that's what makes it fun.
Absolutely. Always keep them guessing. Thanks for joining me today on the Leading Through Crisis podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a minute to rate and review us on your podcast app. If you're interested in learning more about any of our guests, you can find us online at www.leadingthroughcrisis.ca.